So a very good evening to all of you. On behalf of the AOC and Web Academy, we are into the last series, now the third and concluding series and the last few talks. And we have kept it very simple. Now it will be basically like a revision class for all of us, right from the students to the faculty. And to chair this session, I invite Dr. Prakash Paudal, who is from Dharan, Nepal. He is the head of the Department of Pediatrics and Adolescent Medicine from BP Koirala Institute of Health Sciences. And he's also in charge of the Pediatric Neurology Clinic there as well as HIV at the BP Koirala Institute. And he has done his clinical fellowship in pediatric neurology from KKH Hospital, Singapore, and has done several short courses in India, like in Lady Harding Medical College, and from all over the world. I could see from Seoul, from Netherlands, from Belgium, and he's also a pet faculty of British Pediatric Neurology Association and has more than 30 publications. So I welcome Dr. Prakash Paudal to chair this session. Over to you, Dr. Prakash.
Thank you, ma'am, for a nice introduction. Good evening from Nepal, and welcome to everyone in today's AOCN webinar. First of all, I would like to thank AOCN team for providing me this opportunity to chair such an important webinar session. These AOCN webinar series have been really valuable, not only to disseminate knowledge, but also to connect people working in the same field throughout many South Asian countries and other countries as well. Coming to today's topic, the use of MRI brain to assess for intracranial pathology has become standard of care when the patient has developmental delay or seizures or other CNS problems. The pediatric MRI comes with a concomitant challenge, that is distinguishing normal developmental stages from true pathology. This seemingly simple distinction is sometimes one of the most difficult tasks of MRI interpretation because of two reasons. Number one, normal MRI appearance of infants and children may differ dramatically from that of an adult MRI. And there is rapid changes in normal imaging appearance during brain development. Therefore, today's webinar topic, normal anatomy and maturation on MRI brain from newborn to adolescence, will be focused on illustrating and describing normal brain myelination, maturation, and anatomy from neonatal to adolescent age. This will provide decision support for neurologists and pediatricians during the diagnostic process. Without much delay, I would like to introduce today's honorable speaker, Dr. Yogeshwari Deshmukh, who is an eminent neuroradiologist. She is consultant neuroradiologist at Star Imaging Center at Pune, India. She is gold medalist in DNB radiology from PT Hinduja National Hospital. She did DMRD from KEM Hospital, Mumbai, and she completed her fellowship in neuroradiology, head and neck imaging from Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. She has a number of publications and has contributed many chapters in many neuroradiology related books. Now may I hand over this session to Dr. Deshmukh. Please, Dr. Deshmukh.
Hello everyone. Thank you for that kind introduction. Well, you have almost covered the aim of this topic today. The topic name suggests that it's a maturational changes in MRI from newborn to adolescent. Today, I'll be focusing mainly on the myelination because it is difficult to cover everything in the session of 40 minutes. I think myelination is the most important thing while assessing pediatric brain, because especially when the child is less than 3 years, because the aim of imaging is always to differentiate or being able to pick up normal from abnormal. In adults, it is relatively easy because you have got some defined criteria for normal. But in pediatric patients, especially when the child is less than 3 years or less than 2 years, the definition of normalcy keep changing with the age of the child. What is normal at newborn stage is not normal when the child is of 2 months of old. So, and this happens because there is a change in the myelination or ever developing myelination. So today's lecture is basically going to be about a revision of very basic stuff, and it is the pictorial review of how myelination progresses on both T1 and T2 weighted images in pediatric patients, especially less than 2.5 years of age. And then we will see what changes to expect, what sequences to be used, etc., etc. Before we start the myelination, I want you all to always keep in mind these two important concepts about myelination. Remember that myelination is not an all or none phenomena. It is not a one-time process. It's a ongoing progressive process. So there is a continuous myelination that is happening in the brain. So brain myelination starts actually at the age of 5 months of your gestational 5 months of your gestational age, and then it continues till the adulthood. But the apparent changes are seen only for a limited period of time. Later on, these changes that are happening because of the continuous myelination may not be apparent on imaging. So why it is important to know that the myelination is a progressive process, because you have to understand that every structure is myelinating, but it is myelinating at a different pace and at a different degree, or up to a degree or different degree of myelination. Plus the onset of myelination is different for every structure. And because of that, what you see on MR is actually apparent myelination and not actual myelination. So some structures which may appear on T1 weighted image as myelinated, at the same time, it may not appear on T2 weighted images as a myelinated structure. So you should not confuse these two things, because what we are looking at is an apparent myelination, and hence it will depend on the kind of MR that you are using, that is the strength of the magnet. In 1.5 Tesla MR, you are likely to see the complete change happening around 2 years of age. But with the resolution of MR that you get with 3 Tesla, sometimes the subcortical unmyelinated fibers you can see till 2.5 to 3 years of age. And then you should not confuse it with the pathological process. It is just part of your normal myelination. So important is to remember that different structures are myelinating at different pace to a different degree, and the onset is different. So you have to know the exact time of appearance of these structures on images. So what are the sequences that you use to study myelination? The basic sequence that we use for the primary estimation of myelination are T1 weighted and T2 weighted images. Now, in an adult brain, or even in a brain of a child who is more than 3 years of age, this is the normal appearance of T1 and this is the normal appearance of T2. So normal appearance of T1 means the CSF looks black, the gray matter is gray, and the white matter is white. Whereas on T2, the CSF is white, the gray matter is gray, but the white matter is dark in color. But this is for a myelinated brain. In a neonatal brain, what you see is exactly opposite. On a T1 weighted images, the gray matter looks gray, but the white matter, instead of white, it looks dark. That's why they say that in a neonatal brain, the T1 looks like T2 in terms of the intensity of the gray matter and the white matter, whereas T2 looks like T1 in terms of intensity of gray matter versus white matter. So now, as the child starts maturing, what are the changes that we expect on T1 weighted and T2 weighted images? Now on T1 weighted images, the white matter, which looks dark, this dark signal of white matter, or this bright on T1 weighted images, or the white signal of white matter on T2 weighted images, is basically because the neonatal brain has got a lot of water. So water signal is hypointense on T1 and hyperintense on T2. As the brain start myelinating, so because of the deposition of myelin is rich in your lipids and glycolipids, and that produces a bright signal on T1 weighted images. So as the deposition of myelin increases, on T1 weighted images, you will start seeing the increase in the bright signal of your white matter. And when the brain myelinates, to completely to the subcortical white matter, you will see this complete bright signal on T1 weighted images. So this T1 weighted signal is mainly dependent on the lipid or glycolipid content of the myelin. But the darkening of T2 weighted signal on our maturing brain is not because of the lipid content of the myelin, but it is because of the reduction of the water from the brain parenchyma. So that's why when the myelin is getting deposited, you see the changes appearing earlier on T1 weighted images, whereas they appear late on T2 weighted images, because the T2 weighted images, the intensity is dependent on the reduction of water and not the increase in the lipid of the water. So the myelin lipids, basically these are hydrophobic agents. So they push away the water. So as this myelin starts increasing, the water starts reducing, and that's why you will get gradual decrease in the white matter. There are stages where you will see this inhomogeneous white matter signal in both on T1 and T2 weighted images. You should not confuse it, because this is related to the basic primary concept that every structure is myelinating at a different pace and to a different degree of myelination. So more the myelinated structures, it is going to look dark. Lesser the myelinated structure, it is going to look slightly white on T2 weighted images, and vice versa on T1 weighted images. Now, so which are the exact areas you should be looking at when you want to assess the myelination of a child? Before we get onto those slices, I would like to discuss the basic anatomy so that every one of us, especially the residents who might be attending this course, to know the basic anatomy of your brain parenchyma. Now, as a radiologist, we keep on describing the brain can be divided into two parts: supratentorial brain parenchyma and infratentorial brain parenchyma. Then this tentorium is the structure which actually divides your supra and infratentorial brain parenchyma. In the infratentorial brain parenchyma, this cauliflower-like structure that you see is your cerebellum, and the pregnant lady that is standing in front of it is your brainstem. So this,
sorry to interrupt. We are not able to see anything.
Oh, the connection
the slide is seen. Only the slide is seen before we start.
Can you see now?
Yeah, I can see.
Now, can you see?
Yeah. Yeah, continue.
Yeah. So where was I? So basically, so you all could hear till brainstem, right? Hello?
Yeah, we could hear that.
Continue.
Yeah. So the belly of the pregnant lady is your pons, the upper thorax is your midbrain, and the lower thorax is your medulla. Now, when you take a slice through the medulla, this is how it will look on your axial T2 weighted images. So here the structure is your medulla, and this bilateral you will see cerebellar hemisphere. The vermis is your midline structure. When you take a section through the pons, you will see the pons here. Pons is the bulkiest portion of your brainstem, and the pons will be connected to your cerebellum through the middle cerebellar peduncle, so what we call as MCPs. And these are your cerebellar hemispheres. This portion is your vermis. This is right cerebellar hemisphere, left cerebral hemisphere. Now the area that you see here is the region of your dentate nuclei. This is the posterior cranial fossa at the level of pons. And at the same slice, the part of brain that you see, or superior supratentorial parenchyma, are your temporal lobes. When you go through midbrain, the Mickey Mouse structure here on axial images is your midbrain. The two ears of Mickey Mouse are actually your cerebral peduncles, where you will have substantia nigra and your corticospinal tracts. The area of supratentorial brain parenchyma front is frontal lobe. On both sides will be your temporal lobes, and posteriorly will be your occipital lobes. The part of hippocampus you will be seeing just lateral to your midbrain. So this is about the infratentorial brain parenchyma. On these sections, we'll be seeing the myelination. Then when we go a little up through this, so this is the region of basal ganglia. And this is one of the most important slice as far as the myelination is concerned. Now, the structure here is your frontal horns. The structure that you see here is your trigones of the lateral ventricle. Now the structure or the gray matter nucleus that lies here is your caudate nucleus, and the triangular structure that you see here is the lentiform nucleus. Now this lentiform nucleus can be divided into two parts. The medial part is your globus pallidus, the lateral part is your putamen. So the putamen and globus pallidus together are called as lentiform nucleus, and lentiform nucleus plus caudate together are called as corpus striatum. So when you say striatal affection, now there is a confusion about this terminology. Some people think that the caudate, or believe that caudate and putamen is the part of striatum, or according to some people the whole thing is part of striatum. Let's not get into that, but whenever we are talking about striatal necrosis, we are talking about this area. Now, the bulky gray matter nucleus that you see is your thalamus. The boomerang-like structure in this section here is your internal capsule. The posterior part is the posterior limb of internal capsule. The anterior part is the anterior limb of internal capsule. Now you see thick bands joining the frontal lobe here. So that is the genu of your corpus callosum. And the posterior band behind your trigones is the splenium of your corpus callosum, which connects your posterior parts of the brain. So this is about the basal ganglia section. Now coming to the next section, which is above the level of your lateral ventricle, and that is the section of your centrum semiovale. Now what is central semiovale? Centrum semiovale is nothing but the bulk of white matter that you see in this particular section. So it has got all progestional association plus commissural fiber, etc., etc. The term, we always hear the term centrum semiovale and corona radiata. So above the level of lateral ventricles, we use the term centrum semiovale. At the level of lateral ventricles, the white matter tracts that you see abutting the ventricular margin, that portion is the corona radiata, which ultimately gets into the internal capsules to form your corticospinal tracts. So this is the section of your centrum semiovale, which includes your deep white matter. Now, when you divide the white matter, you divide it into periventricular or deep white matter and subcortical white matter. When we use the term periventricular white matter, it is usually within 1 centimeter of your ventricular lining. When we use the deep white matter, it is closer to the ventricle, but beyond 1 centimeter. Now 1 centimeter is just an approximate distance to give you a rough idea. So sometimes the deep white matter is also called as the intermediate zone of your white matter. And the subcortical white matter is the white matter that lines the cortex of your brain parenchyma. So this is about the white matter. Now coming to a section above, which is many times we keep reporting perirolandic cortex is affected, perirolandic cortex is gliotic, etc., etc. So where exactly is the perirolandic cortex? How do you identify it on an axial image? So Rolandic sulcus means your central sulcus. So in this topmost section of your brain, this is your midline. The gyrus that is running anterior to posterior is your superior frontal gyrus, which is just side of the midline. This gyrus will form a L with your precentral gyrus. Now this precentral gyrus has a course like this, which is running horizontally. So if this is a precentral gyrus, the sulcus behind it becomes your central sulcus. So central sulcus means your Rolandic sulcus, and the gyrus posterior is your postcentral gyrus. So this is your motor cortex, this is your sensory cortex, and this area together is called as the perirolandic region. The cortex lining here, the sulcus, central sulcus or Rolandic sulcus, is called as the perirolandic cortex. All right, so this is about the anatomy of the brain. Now coming to the myelination. Though myelination does not follow all or none law, thankfully it follows some rules of myelination, with the help of which we can try to guess or predict what is the normal stage of myelination, or depending after looking at a particular scan. And it also helps us differentiating between pathology as well as normal anatomy. How do you do that? So what are the basic rules? Basic rule is the myelination continues or progresses from caudal to cranial direction. What does that mean? That means that the brainstem is the first structure to develop, then the cerebellum, then the basal ganglia, and then your cerebral hemispheres. So if you are seeing the white matter myelinated in the cerebral hemispheres, but if you are seeing that the cerebellar white matter is not yet myelinated, that means it is definitely abnormal, because by rule, this should be the first structure to get myelinated and this should be the later structure to get myelinated. Similarly, the way it follows caudal to cranial pattern, it also follows dorsal to ventral pattern. Dorsal means towards your back, ventral is towards your torso. So usually the occipital lobes are the first to get myelinated, and the myelination continues anteriorly towards the frontal lobe or temporal lobe. So these are the frontal and temporal lobes are the last to get myelinated. So in a situation when you are seeing the frontal lobe's white matter which is myelinated or dark on T2, but you are seeing that the posterior white matter is not looking dark or it is looking slightly whitish, then you know that there is definitely some pathology, because this should have been myelinated before this. So this is one of the clues that might help you to diagnose a condition. Then again, central, the third rule it follows is it moves from center to peripheral. So the first to get myelinated is your periventricular, then your deep, and then it goes to the subcortical white matter. Similarly, if you are seeing a subcortical white matter myelinated, but the periventricular white matter is not myelinated, then you are looking at some leukodystrophy. Okay. Now, these are the general rules that a myelination follows. Then within a region also, it follows a pattern. For example, if it's a brainstem, in brainstem, first the posterior part will get myelinated, then the anterior part will get myelinated. In the cerebral cortex as well, first the occipital lobes will get myelinated, then the frontal lobes will get myelinated. Even for, can we put him on mute?
Dr. Paudel, can you mute yourself? Hello, Dr. Paudel? Please mute yourself.
Okay, so even for the internal capsules, the posterior limbs will get myelinated first, then the anterior limbs. In corpus callosum, splenium will get myelinated first, then the genu of the corpus callosum. So this is how the myelination will progress. Also, the functional system which are more important for the child's life in earlier life will get myelinated first. Like the somatosensory cortex, you will have it myelinated, or the myelination has already started in this area when the child is born. Similarly, the visual cortex will get myelinated first. So these are the rules of myelination within the region as well. So that will also help you in diagnosing the conditions. So sometimes you will see that anterior limbs are myelinated, but the posterior limbs are not myelinated. In that case, you should be suspecting some pathological condition. So this is how these rules help you. Now, coming to the myelination on T1 weighted images. Now, T1 weighted images are the best images to assess myelination for first 6 to 8 months of life, because T1 weighted sequence is more sensitive for the myelination at this age, whereas the T2 is slightly delayed. But if you're assessing a pathology, both T1 and T2 should be assessed together. What I'm talking right now is only about myelination, okay? So coming to the T1 weighted, how the myelination progresses on T1 weighted images. Now at birth, the structures that are already myelinated are the medulla. In the pons, it will be the ventral pons which is myelinated. Dorsal will be unmyelinated, sorry, a dorsal pons which is myelinated, and ventral will be not myelinated. And whereas in the midbrain, you will have the dorsal tracts which are superior peduncles or MLF, that is medial longitudinal fasciculus, medial lemniscus. These will be myelinated at birth itself. So these bright spots is the normal myelination that happens at birth. At the level of basal ganglia, now this is a very important section, so I'll just zoom it. Now at the level of basal ganglia, you have to remember this, because this will help you to differentiate between hypoxia and normal myelination. And when the findings are subtle, how do you differentiate between them? So at birth in a normal infant, you will see that the posterior limb of internal capsule which is myelinated. Along with that, you will have, this is thalamus. So this is the ventrolateral part of the thalamus which is myelinated. Sometimes some part of the globus pallidus or putamen may be myelinated, but the important thing to remember is the posterior limb of internal capsule is the most myelinated structures. It will be the brightest structure. So if you see other structure getting brighter than your posterior limb of internal capsule, then you should suspect hypoxia in that patient. So in this particular section, you are not seeing the myelination of your posterior limb. That is because it is edematous because of the hypoxia, and you are seeing the myelination in rest of the structures. So this is called as the absent posterior limb sign of your hypoxia, which is the basal pattern of your hypoxic ischemic injury. Coming to the higher sections. So coming to the centrum semiovale, sometimes you may subtle hyperintensity in the region of central corona radiata or the central sensory motor white matter tracts. And this can be a normal finding. And you might see subtle hyperintense signal of the perirholandic cortex. As long as it is subtle and as long as it is less than this bright signal, you are fine with it. But the moment you see it is getting darker or brighter than your corona radiata or centrum semiovale, then you should suspect a hypoxic injury. So perirholandic cortex is again one of the common areas that may get affected in hypoxia. So this is how you will differentiate between a normal myelination and abnormal hypoxia. Okay, now this was at birth. Now coming to 1 to 2 months, now nothing really changes much in 1 to 2 months. Only thing that will happen is this perirholandic cortex will start getting more brighter, and so will be the white matter in the centrum semiovale, which carries your sensory motor fibers. So if you do not see the myelination happening in this area at 1 to 2 months of age, then you should suspect that the myelination might be slightly delayed in this child. This is the only significance of it. But at 3 months, you will see a lot of changes that are happening on T1 weighted images. Firstly, the brainstem, the dorsal as well as ventral part, both will be myelinated. So is the anterior portion of the pons as well as posterior portion of the pons, cerebellar white matter. The posterior limb of internal capsule will start getting thicker, and the anterior portion will also get myelinated. Plus, you will start seeing myelination in the anterior limbs of internal capsule. And in the centrum semiovale, the myelination will start going anteriorly or slightly peripherally. So just to compare with at the time of birth, look at the difference that you would see in these images. So here only the dorsal part which is myelinated, whereas here everything looks myelinated. Look at the cerebellum. Cerebellum is more of less homogeneous signal intensity. Here you will start seeing the white matter which is myelinated and probably getting into the subcortical portion of your cerebellar folia. Here it's only the dorsal pons that is myelinated. Here everything is myelinated, including your cerebellar white matter. Similarly, the changes are seen at the level of basal ganglia. Now, another important thing that you should notice is look at the white matter signal intensity of the rest of the white matter as compared to your 3 months. This means that even the rest of the white matter is also getting myelinated, but it is not as myelinated as these structures, because these are the faster structures that are getting myelinated, which are important for your normal milestone achievement of a child. So do not confuse especially this appearance on imaging. So you have to always remember that when one structure is getting myelinated or it is better seen, that means it has got more myelin deposition than other structures. You just have to remember what is the milestone that you're supposed to expect at 3 months. So at 3 months, you should be able to see some myelin that is getting deposited in the anterior limbs of internal capsule along with the posterior limbs, the cerebellar white matter, and the ventral pons or ventral brainstem that should get myelinated by this age. As you move on to the 4th month, now if you see in the posterior cranial fossa, there is not much of change that is happening. At the level of basal ganglia, the splenium was not looking bright at 3 months, but it starts looking brighter at 4 months of age. So the splenium of the corpus callosum will be seen as bright structure at 4 months of age, but the genu is still unmyelinated or not that much myelinated. Whereas at the level of centrum semiovale, it will just keep progressing towards the periphery and anteriorly. The first, it will progress posteriorly towards the occipital cortex, and then it will start progressing towards your frontal cortex. So now from 4 months, at 4 months, you saw that the splenium got myelinated. At 6 months, you will start getting the genu of the corpus callosum, which is myelinated. So by this age, you have to see there are 2 important changes that are happening. The thin corpus callosum is getting slightly thicker, And the spleen, with only the splenium or posterior part of your corpus callosum, which was getting myelinated, now has started myelinating or has developed myelination till the genu. So it is an important milestone of myelination on T1 wetted images. Now, again, look at the white matter change in the rest of the brain parenchyma. The overall brain or overall white matter has started looking whiter. So on T1 wetted images, the brighter the signal as the child ages is a better signal. So with the age, if you see the lighter signal or hypo signal, that means it's something abnormal that is happening with the child. So at 8 months of age, your corpus callosum is fully developed. The cerebellum, the white matter has actually gone into the subcortical region. So it is almost like an adult pattern. Even on the supratentorial brain parenchyma, you see the white matter tracts has myelinated almost up to the subcortical white matter. Only the U fibers may not be myelinated at this age. So from 8 months of age, it's more or less adult pattern you start seeing. That's why we assess myelination on T2 wetted images once the child crosses 6 to 8 months of age on T1 wetted images, because now the only structures that is has to be myelinated remains your subcortical white matter in different lobes of your brain. So that you will see on, so this is like almost adult pattern. Only thing is some hyposignal that you will see in frontal lobes and sometimes in the temporal lobe. So temporal lobe white matter is the last white matter that gets myelinated, apparently myelinated on T1 wetted images. So now with the flow, you understand that everything is getting myelinated or being apparent on T1 wetted images at a different stage or different age of life. So is there a way to remember this? So there is a nice article about clock of myelination. So this clock actually represents your 12 months of myelination. So everybody has to know what is there at birth. What are the structures that are myelinated at birth? Everyone has to know that. But so as a child is of 3 months, in the posterior cranial fossa, you must have cerebellar white matter, which is myelinated. When the child reaches 4 months, you must use splenium as your guiding star to see that the myelination is going according to the age. And at the 6 months is the genu you should be looking at when you are looking at the myelination. So this is how the numerical presentation rather. So posterior limb at birth, anterior limb of internal capsule should be at 3 months, splenium of the corpus callosum at 4 months, genu of the corpus callosum at 6 months. Normally, the subcortical white matter of the occipital lobes is done by 7 months of age, whereas the frontal lobes will be between 11 to 15 months depending on the age of myelination. Okay, so this is the myelination on T1 wetted images. Now, coming to myelination on T2 wetted images. So as I told you, T2 wetted myelination is not purely dependent on your lipid content, but it is dependent on the decrease in the water that happens in the brain parenchyma. So at birth, there is a lot of water that in a neonatal brain, and which makes it look hyper intense or quite bright on T2 wetted images. So what you have to remember is, so in this white matter, which looks so bright on T2 wetted images, sometimes it gets really difficult to understand whether it is pathologically bright or this is the normal bright signal. In those cases, sometimes we take use of ADC maps to see if we are seeing excess of water on those ADC maps. If there is an excess of water that is being seen on ADC maps, then we know that we are probably looking at a pathological process. So at birth, the myelination milestones on T2 wetted are almost similar to T1 wetted. That is, your medulla is myelinated, your dorsal pons is myelinated. One important point I want to make here is, now this is your dentate nucleus, right? So the hilus of the dentate nucleus will always look bright at the time of birth, and it will have a hypointense rim which is myelinated at the time of birth. The importance is not to confuse it with the dentate hyperintensity. So this is a normal finding at the age of, in a neonatal age group. Just remember that. Do not get confused it for a pathology. Similarly, in the midbrain, you will have the dorsal tracts which are getting myelinated. Now, at the level of basal ganglia, is the same composition. You will see the posterior limb of internal capsule, which is myelinated, but you will not see it throughout the entire extent. You will see some portion, the posterior portion, which is actually your corticospinal tracts, along with your ventrolateral thalami and some part of the putamen, but this hypointensity will never exceed your posterior limb of internal capsule. The way we had seen that subtle hyperintensity in the perirolandic cortex can be seen, similarly, subtle hypointensity in the perirolandic cortex can be seen even on T2 weighted images, but it is not very obvious. It becomes obvious after around 1 to 2 months of age, as seen here. So at this particular age, the important change that happened is only the hilus, that what we were, hilus of the dentate nucleus, which was looking bright, has started becoming dark on T2 weighted images. So by 2 months of age, usually you will start seeing the darkening of your dentate nuclei, which is a normal finding. And similarly, you will start seeing darkening of this perirolandic cortex, and it will actually stand out from rest of the gyral cortex. So this is a normal finding and should not be confused with the pathology. If you see this kind of finding at birth, then it may be abnormal. You have to correlate with the T1 shortening on your T1 weighted images or your diffusion weighted images. But at the age of 1 month, this is a normal finding. All right, so this is just to explain you how it looks at birth and how it becomes dark at the age of 1 to 2 months. Okay, now coming to the 4th month of T2 weighted images. Now in this in this particular at this age, now the important changes that happen are in the posterior cranial fossa. So you actually start seeing, so if you compare with the birth, look at the signal intensity of the cerebellum and pons. So it is the ventral part of the pons has also become dark. Part of the cerebellum has also started becoming dark. If you compare the basal ganglia section, except for the generalized decrease in the white matter signal intensity, which happens because of your reduced water content, you will not appreciate much of the difference. Only thing that will happen is this posterior limb of internal capsule, which was thin and maybe only seen in this region, has started widening, and it has started progressing anteriorly. So posterior to anterior myelination that is happening in that particular area. Then if you see the corpus callosum, so here is the genu of the corpus callosum and here is the splenium of the corpus callosum, but by the myelination has not started yet, whereas at the 4 months the T1 weighted images will have shown your splenial myelination. So T1 weighted images are a little early to pick up myelination than your T2 weighted images. Whereas the change that happens here is at 2 months of age, it was the only this cortex which was dark, but now the rest of the cortex will also start becoming darker and they become iso-intense to each other. So this was at the 1 month of age, and this is at your 4 months. So everything looks quite iso-intense to each other. So whenever you see any abnormality in this region, especially the dark cortex along with some dark signal in the underlying white matter, you should suspect that if you're dealing with a cortical dysplasia. So by this age, you should have the cortex which looks smoothly uniform and have the same signal intensity as that of the perirolandic cortex. Now coming to the 6 months of age, now here in this particular section, you will start seeing the darkening of the splenium of the corpus callosum. You will see some myelination happening in the anterior limbs of internal capsule, but this is an early myelination. You may or may not see every time. Let's compare with the 4th month MRI. So this is a splenium of the corpus callosum, which is thin. This has become thicker and this has also become darker. Genu has also started looking a little dark, but it is always less dark than the splenium of the corpus callosum. The genu will become darkest at the 8 months of age. So on the T2 weighted images, it is at birth. This will become 6 months and this will become 8 months. Now, if you look at the signal intensity of the rest of the white matter, the white matter which was too bright on T2 weighted images in earlier months has started becoming almost iso intense to your cortex. Now this age is really cumbersome to pick up a cortical malformation, because the white matter in less than 6 months of age, the white matter signal of the white matter and the gray signal of the cortex help you differentiate between, they maintain a contrast, so it is easy to pick up a pathology. But by this age, when the white matter starts becoming iso intense to your cortex, then it becomes difficult to pick up a pathology. Then you will be able to pick up a pathology later when the myelination is complete, where the dark signal of the white matter will contrast with the gray signal, and then the things become apparent. But this is a very difficult and tricky age on both T1 and T2 weighted images, especially in patients with epilepsy, where you are looking at subtle cortical malformations. So normally, if you happen to do a MRI between this age group, that is 6 months to 12 months or 15 months, many a times you have to repeat a MRI to see or pick up the abnormality. Now later on, by 8 months of age, everything around the basal ganglia or the major milestones around the basal ganglia are achieved, except for your anterior limb of internal capsule. It starts myelinating around 7th, 8th month of age, but it should complete myelination around 11 months of age. This is how, 1 second. So that is the milestone that you see on T2 weighted images. So as you compare all these images, you will realize that this section looks more or less the same. Only changes that are happening are in the centrum semioval, that is the white matter tracts, and in the subcortical regions of your white matter. Now, you will see some heterogeneous signal intensity in these areas. So the way they are looking dark, you will get some intermittent white patches. Now these white patches should not be really white. They should look subtle or slightly grayish in colors. As long as they are grayish in color, it is fine. It is normal myelination. The moment you start getting a stark difference between this myelinated and this area, then you should suspect a pathology. But inhomogeneous appearance of your brain parenchyma in this age group or of the white matter is all dependent on the degree of myelination that particular tract has got at that point of time. That's why we say it's the apparent myelination that MR pickups and not the actual myelination. Okay, so this whole, all things, so if you start noticing, so from center to it has started moving peripherally, the first change will start happening in the parietal lobes or the occipital lobes, and then later it will start going to your frontal lobes. All these changes keep happening till you achieve a complete myelination, or the myelination is actually, myelination actually goes on till adulthood, but the apparent myelination is usually done, or the pediatric brain start looking like an adult brain around 2 to 2.5 years of age. Sometimes in some kids, it could be 3 years of age. So this is a myelination chart or the myelination clock you're supposed to follow on T2 weighted images. So by the 2 months of age, you should have the dentis hilus, which looks hypointense. By 4 months of age, your pons should be completely myelinated. By 6 months of age, the splenium should start looking darker. By 8 months, it should be the splenium of the corpus callosum. And by 11 months, it should be the anterior limb of the internal capsule. So imagine on T1 weighted images, the anterior limb of internal capsule is actually seen at 3 months of age, but it takes around 8 months to complete the myelination on T2 weighted images. So you should not get confused about the age of the myelination when you are seeing T1 and T2 weighted images. So T1 weighted assessment should be done before 6 months of age, and T2 weighted assessment should be done after beyond 6 months of age. Now, why you should be talking so much about the myelination, normal pattern, how a normal brain looks, or how at a particular age, because you want to differentiate between a normal brain versus an abnormal brain. The most confusing part is whether it's a hypomyelinating brain or this is a normal brain. Now, you always have to correlate the age of the patient with the myelination milestones, or they should be at least approximately close to each other. Now, this is a 8-month-old child, right? This is a T2 weighted images. Now, at 8 months, the structures those that should be myelinated or are posterior limb of internal capsule, anterior limb of internal capsule, splenium, as well as genu of the corpus callosum. Now, myelination on T2 weighted images means the dark signal. We are not seeing any dark signal here, right? So that means there is some problem with the myelination. So now we have confirmed that this is not normal myelination. So this can be either hypomyelination, could be dysmyelination, or it could be demyelination. What is the difference between dysmyelination and demyelination? Dysmyelination is production of abnormal myelin, whereas demyelination is normal myelin has been formed, but because of some process, some pathology, the myelin has been destroyed. So that is your demyelination. Now, how will you differentiate between a hypomyelination, between hypomyelinating pathology or leukodystrophy versus a true leukodystrophy or demyelination? You have to look at the T1 weighted images. Now, this is just to show you the difference. This is a 8-month-old child. This is a normal brain parenchyma, that how it will look, and look at this brain parenchyma. Now, so to differentiate between the hypomyelination and dysmyelination or demyelination, you have to look at the T1 weighted images. Now, hypomyelination is not absence of myelin. Some amount of myelin is formed. Since the T1 weighted images are more sensitive to myelin, they will pick up this myelin signal. So on T1 weighted images, the hypomyelinating pathology will either look iso-intense or very slightly hypo-intense to the gray matter, but it will not look too hypo-intense. Like the way it may not look as hyper-intense as your normal brain parenchyma, but it will not look as hypo-intense as the dysmyelinating pathology. So if you see a bright signal on T2 weighted images, which is iso-intense on T1 weighted images, the possibility of it representing a hypomyelination dystrophy is more likely than a dysmyelinating pathology. So here is the comparison. So this is T2 bright. See, but look at this T2 bright signal here. This is quite bright than what we are seeing on hypomyelinating pathology, because here some amount of myelin is formed. Look at this dark signal here. This is too hypo, but whereas on T1 weighted images, this almost look like a normal brain parenchyma. Okay, so this is about your hypomyelination and dysmyelination. Now, there are certain confusions we always see when we are looking at pediatric brain MRI. So whether to call it normal or abnormal. Nowadays, what we see, these are the two important areas, globus pallidus and central tegmental tracts. Sometimes you see this subtle hyperintensity in the globus pallidus, especially in the kids who are between the age of 4 months to 10 months. Now, this pattern is a normal physiological process that happens. The globus pallidi can be subtly hyperintense to rest of the basal ganglia in this particular age group. So you should not associate it with the pathology. Now, there are a lot of pathologies which can give rise to this this globus pallidus hyperintensity, like kernicterus, or now in kernicterus you at least have a history, but then you can have developmental delay and you see such signal, then people confuse it with the creatine deficiency or may call it a metabolic disorder, but this could be just sometimes misguiding finding. So you have to compare. So you have to compare it this with the rest of the white matter. So if this is very subtle, this is like in a age group of 4 to 10 months, it is likely to be a normal physiological hyperintensity that you see in globus pallidus. Another thing that we have recently started seeing is this central tegmental tract hyperintensity, which may have restricted diffusion on T2 weighted images. Now, this is a very non-specific finding. We see it in hypoxia, sometimes in epilepsy patient, even in metabolic disorders, but we have started seeing it, or patients who are on vigabatrin, etc. But we do see it as a normal maturation process. So now there are two schools of thought. Some people find it pathological, but a non-specific finding, whereas according to some people, this could be just a part of your normal maturation process. Normally, you don't see it less than 4 months of age, but after basically 4 months to almost up to 7 years, you can see this hyperintensity. In my routine practice, I have seen it in the late infantile, like between the 6 months to a year or so, as a normal process where the child is for some other pathology and we are seeing this just as an incidental. In those cases, we just mark it as a normal maturation process. Okay, now another important concept is of terminal zones of myelination. Are we good to go or should I stop?
Please continue. Please
Yeah.
continue.
So terminal zones of myelination, you have, now as I told you before, it's the periventricular white matter which myelinates first and then the subcortical white matter. But in the terminal zones of myelination, you will sometimes see that there is a subtle ill-defined hyperintensity that you see around the posterior part of your ventricles, more in the peritrigonal region. They, in the peritrigonal region, they are actually superior and posterior to your trigones of the lateral ventricles. This is a typical location that you see. Normally, people confuse it with the periventricular leukomalacia. Now, what are the differences that you see? How do you differentiate between a periventricular leukomalacia versus terminal zones of myelination? First, this signal is very ill-defined and subtle signal. You will not see it very bright. Sometimes the bright signal can be seen, but that is because of the prominent perivascular spaces that you see in this region. Second, you will see this triangular kind of configuration on T2 weighted images, coronal images. So this and apex will be always directed upwards. And important point is you will always see that there is a myelinated white matter between the ventricle and this ill-defined hyperintensity. That's how it differentiates. Whereas in periventricular leukomalacia, what you will see, there is a white matter signal which is reaching your ventricular margin. It is usually associated with some distortion of the ventricular margin because this is a white matter volume loss and it will pull the ventricles towards itself. And if you see it on T2 weighted images, you will not find that myelin layer between the hyperintensity and the margin of the ventricle. So this plus, since there is a white matter volume loss, if you see the sagittal image, you will see the thinning of the corpus callosum depending on which lobe white matter volume loss is, predominant white matter volume loss is there. For example, if it's a hypoglycemic injury, usually you have parieto-occipital gliosis. In that case, only the splenium will look thinner. Whereas when you have a massive insult where the frontal to, now in this particular case, it's the frontal as well as parietal occipital white matter has gone. So there is diffuse thinning of your corpus callosum. So this is how you'll differentiate between terminal zones of myelination and PVL. Then there is a concept called as benign enlargement of subarachnoid spaces or external hydrocephalus. How do you differentiate it from subdural hygromas? Normally differentiating between the subdural hygromas, hematomas and benign enlargement of subarachnoid spaces is not that difficult, but the problem arises when now in this particular case, this is a hematoma. So you can see a differential signal from the CSF. But when when it is a hygroma, you have this signal intensity similar to CSF. So how do you differentiate between the two? Now, in the subarachnoid space, basically these cortical veins can traverse the subarachnoid space. So if you see the veins traversing the space, this white matter signal, then it is likely to be a subarachnoid space enlargement. This is called as a positive cortical vein sign. Whereas when you do not see that veins traversing it, or when they are pushed inside, then it is likely to be a subdural hygroma. This is how you differentiate. This benign enlargement of CSF space is a commonly seen finding, and it is supposed to be a physiological thing because arachnoid villi are not that mature. So CSF absorption cannot match up with the CSF production, and therefore it results in some enlargement. By the age of 18 months, usually the arachnoid villi mature, and then this gradually this enlargement will reduce. Now, this was external hydrocephalus as some call as, but there is sometimes we will have a confusion in differentiating ex-vacuo dilatation versus hydrocephalus. Now, ex-vacuo dilatation is secondary to white matter volume loss. Both these entities can have enlargement of the ventricles with periventricular white matter signal. In cases of gliosis, the periventricular white matter signal is because of gliosis. Whereas in the cases of hydrocephalus, the periventricular signal is because of the seepage of CSF through the, so how do you differentiate? When you see this white matter signal associated with widening of sulcal spaces, then it is likely to be a gliotic phenomena or cortical atrophy associated or white matter volume loss leading to your ex vasodilatation. When this white matter hyperintensity and enlargement of your ventricles is associated with effacement of your sulcal spaces, then it is likely to be a hydrocephalus. Another question a lot of pediatric neurologist friend ask me is, when do you call a corpus callosum normal, hypoplastic, or atrophic? Now, these are all images of corpus callosum. In this particular case, this also looks uniformly thin in caliber. So whether this is hypoplastic, here it looks uniformly thin in caliber. So which one of this is hypoplastic and which one of it is atrophic or acquired or thinning of corpus callosum? So let's look at the normal appearance. So corpus callosum comes to midline. These are basically your commissural fibers joining two both lobes, right? Both cerebral hemispheres. So they come in the midline around 20 weeks of age. So by 20 weeks of age, anyways, your corpus callosum is formed, all parts, that is genu, body, splenium and rostrum of the corpus callosum. Though the myelination is posterior to anterior, the corpus callosum is formed from genu to splenium of the corpus callosum. Rostrum is the last part to develop, but this is how the development is anterior to posterior. At birth, you will see a very thin corpus callosum, which is not myelinated, and this is a normal appearance of corpus callosum. At birth, you should not confuse it with the corpus callosal hypoplasia or hypogenesis. At 2 months of age, the corpus callosum becomes slightly thicker, but it's still thin. So you should not confuse even at the age of 2 months. At 4 months of age, it becomes slightly thicker, and now the splenium of the corpus callosum start becoming hyperintense or myelinated. So this is a normal appearance at 4 months of age. At 6 months, you will see the corpus callosum getting thicker and even the genu getting hyperintense or myelinated. And at 8 months, it will acquire almost an adult appearance. So this 8 months age is approximate. So around 1 year of age, you will get the normal thickness of corpus callosum like that of an adult patient. One more normal variation that you see is this portion. Now in 25% of the patient, you will see some thinning, or sometimes it is really thin. So that is called as the isthmus of the corpus callosum, which is a normal finding and should not be confused with the focal atrophy or of the corpus callosum. Now coming to this image. So this is at birth scan because the pituitary is quite hyperintense at this. So this is the normal appearance of pituitary in a newborn. You should not confuse with the pituitary hemorrhage because it looks bright. So this is a normal appearance at birth. Now, in this particular case, if you look at the rest of the brain, the cerebellum is myelinated. You can make out the subcortical white matter also has some myelination. But for that age, the corpus callosum is quite thin. But if you look at the corpus callosum, it is seen in entire extent. So the causes can be two. Either if the rest of the brain parenchyma is normal, then this is a hypoplasia of the corpus callosum. But if the rest of the parenchyma has some gliotic changes, then this is an acquired atrophy of the corpus callosum. Now, in this particular case, you have the splenium, which is fully developed. The body is quite thin and genu is normally developed. So now this is always an acquired defect because the development is from anterior to posterior. So if the splenium has developed, that means this has to develop. So if this is not developed, that means it is an acquired pathology. Now, in this particular case was a case of bilateral MCA infarct. So it was the parietal white matter which was gone. And that's why there was this thinning of only the body of the corpus callosum. Now, if the insult is beyond 20 weeks of gestation, then you get this acquired thinning or atrophy of the corpus callosum. But if the insult is before 20 weeks of gestation, when the corpus callosum is already formed, you get something like this. That is the partial oogenesis, where you will see the genu or anterior body form, but the splenium will be absent, etc. So this what we call as a partial oogenesis or hypogenesis of corpus callosum. I think I will stop here. So this was all about some myelination and some common confusion that we see on pediatric MRs.
Dr. Paudel, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
over to you, Dr. Podal.
okay. Thank you, Dr. Deshmukh, for this impressive and informative speech. She has clarified lots of issues and particularly related to pediatric neuro MRI interpretation, and this will be highly useful in our day-to-day practice. She has highlighted upon general anatomic and signal pattern in brain myelination. She has highlighted upon the rule of myelination like caudal to cranial, dorsal to ventral, and central to peripheral. And she also highlighted age-specific progression of myelination on MRI. She highlighted upon how hypomyelination looks like and how dysmyelination looks like and how to differentiate between them. And she also described various sequences of MRI, what to look in which sequences. And she also highlighted upon normal variants, benign variants like BESS. So with this, I would like to hand over the session to Dr. Kavita Srivastava for question answer session. Thank you.
So thank you, Yogeshwari. It was a excellent talk covering almost everything regarding the normal MRI, including myelination and the different kind of doubts that we always keep having. So you've really covered them very well. So are you okay to take some questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So some attendees have still some confusion regarding hypoxic changes versus normal changes in the posterior limb of internal capsule at birth.
Okay. So
if
should
you can just go back to the slide and just tell us.
Yeah, 1 second.
Again.
Have I stopped sharing the screen or?
And no, we are still viewing your screen.
Okay. Okay, so this is a normal thing at the time of in a newborn babies. So what you see is the myelination of the posterior limb of internal capsule. Along normally the thalami and the basal ganglia start their myelination from 25th week of gestation. So there is some myelination which is going on. So along with the posterior limb of internal capsule, you will see the myelination of your ventrolateral thalami, sometimes some part of the globus pallidi. And in some patients or in some newborns, you will see posterior putamen as well. But the important thing that you have to remember is the brightest structure will be your posterior limb of internal capsules. The moment you start seeing this signal or posterior putamen getting brighter than your posterior limb of internal capsule, you should suspect hypoxia. Or if you miss this finding and if you consider this for normal myelination, then you are missing out on basal ganglia pattern of your hypoxia. So in this particular case, you do not see the myelination of your posterior limb of internal capsule. It is not because there is an absent myelination. It is because there is edema of the posterior limb of internal capsule, which gives rise to more water content, which makes it hypointense. So it is not the absence of myelination, it is the edema because of which you get this hypointense signal, and the rest of the structures because of the cytotoxic injury can have the Stephen bright signal. So the moment you start seeing this, you should suspect. So sometimes you will see the signal in globus pallidi, sometimes you will see it here, the posterior putamen. So when you see it here, in the absence of posterior limb of internal capsule, you should call it a hypoxic ischemic injury.
Excellent. So the same areas will also show diffusion restriction, right?
They may, depending on at what stage you are doing the MRI, it all depends. So if you are doing it before 48 hours or something, for first 5 days, you may have restriction of diffusion. But after 5 days or so, there is something called as a pseudo normalization that happens. And the changes are more apparent on your T1 and T2 weighted images. So you have to consider all the sequences while assessing a neonatal hypoxic ischemic injury.
Exactly. And what about the preterm babies then?
In preterm babies, absence of this myelination is a normal finding. So normally the posterior limb of internal capsule start myelinating after 37 to 38 weeks. So if a preterm baby, if you see this absence, then it is not a sign of hypoxia. Normally the preterm baby have a pattern of injury in the watershed zones or in the periventricular white matter. The basal ganglia pattern is less commonly seen. So in those cases, you cannot use this criteria.
Okay. Another question from Dr. Vivek Jain, Jaipur is that globus pallidus myelination with age. So when does significant hypointensity is taken as normal or abnormal? And does SWI images help? Because many a times we are confused whether there is some metal deposition or they are just hypointense.
Okay, that's really a difficult question in the sense it's common confusion. The way I said that the globus pallidus subtle hyperintensity is from 4 to 10 months, then it started becoming isointense to the rest of the basal ganglia. And the hypointensity actually starts from the 9 to 10 years of age, where the global pallidi will start becoming hypointense as compared to the rest of the brain parenchyma. So if you start seeing this global hypointensity before that age, then and you have to compare it with the dentate nucleal deposition. Many times you get deposition of metals. There are particular areas which get this heavy metal deposition. So you have to compare. Regarding the SWI images, the SWI images do help, but even a normal iron deposition can have some hypointense signal on SWI. But when that hypointense signal becomes too dark on SWI, then you would like to call it as a iron deposition. So basically, before 9 years of age, if you start seeing the globus pallidi too hypointense, then it is likely to be a metal deposition. Now that hypointensity continues for a certain age, and after in that particular basically after 10 years of age, you have to compare that hypointensity with the hypointensity of your red nucleus, your substantia nigra, and the dentate nuclei, and see it on SWI images. And you should always do a CT in these patients, because many a time calcium can give that false appearance of hypointensity, and the something which really can be differentiated on the basis of CT and MR, like calcium versus iron, the diagnosis completely changes. So I think this is a kind of experience that you get about the global pallidal hypointensity. It is quite subjective when you want to call it hypointense. Many times when I when the globus pallidi look too hypointense to me, I actually go back to normal age scans of that similar age or age appropriate, and try to see in multiple scans if this is the same signal that I am getting, or is it looking more for this age. So this is really subjective, and you have to really match with the age match control. There is no quantification as of now that we are doing on conventional MR for global pallidal metal deposition.
There are many congratulatory messages that it was an excellent talk and very informative. And few of the panelists are still confused about the differentiation of hypomyelination versus dysmyelination.
Okay.
So could you just a little bit touch again about that?
Okay,
you can just go back to those slides.
Okay. So in hypomyelination, the basic pathology is there is myelin production, but it is to a lesser degree. Okay. Now on T2 weighted images, the myelin, the signal or the dark signal that you get is not because of myelin, but because of the water content. And because the myelin has got lipid, it displaces the water. It has got a hydrophobic nature. So as the myelin content increases, it displaces the water from the T2 weighted images, making it darker. Are we clear till this point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in hypomyelination, what happens? There is a less myelin deposition, right? So it generally, the water content of your normal brain parenchyma is not displaced. So the hyperintense signal stays there on T2 weighted images. Correct?
Yeah.
Whereas on T1 weighted images, the hyperintense signal is because of the lipid and galactocerebroside and etc. etc. So even if there is a small amount of myelin, T1 weighted images are going to show some amount of hyperintensity that you normally see. It may not be like normal white matter signal for that age, but you will see some hyperintensity. So when the scan is looking hyperintense on T2 weighted images, but it is looking iso-intense or subtly hypointense on T1 weighted images, the likely pathology is hypomyelinating leukodystrophy. Now, in hypomyelinating leukodystrophy also there are n number of disorders. So then you have to look for cerebellar atrophy, then if there is a dark signal in globus pallidi, etc. etc. So that's a different story. But for basic differentiation between hypomyelination versus normal myelination is versus dysmyelination is, in a dysmyelinating pathology, what is happening is the myelin is abnormal, right? So this T1 signal you are not going to get. This T1 signal is because of some amount of normal myelin, that is myelin is there in that hypomyelinating disorder. In dysmyelinating disorder, this signal is not there, so you will have hypointense signal on T1 weighted images, and similarly you will have hyperintense signal on T2 weighted images. Now on T2 weighted images there will be too much of, so in dysmyelinating pathology, now here it is kind of as if somebody has wiped the brain, you will get this kind of appearance. Whereas in a dysmyelinating or demyelinating pathology, you will see this kind of brain, where this is typically a demyelinating pathology because normal myelin has developed in the rest of the brain parenchyma. Here myelin was developed, but because of some pathologic process, it had just gone. So it becomes too bright on FLAIR and T2 weighted images and too dark on T1 weighted images. So this is how you diagnose a hypomyelinating from a demyelinating or dysmyelinating pathology.
I think that should explain it like in quite detail you have told us now. Some people want to know like what is the different sequence protocols that we should advise when sending a child for an MRI?
Well,
does it depend on the age or on the pathology?
Basically, normal T1, T2 weighted images that we acquire routinely with diffusion SWI sequence. I do not prefer FLAIR imaging for children less than 2 years of age because myelination is not complete, and FLAIR sequence gives a mixed signal. It shows your normal water of brain parenchyma as well as it shows some hypointense areas because of suppression of water. So it generally do not contribute to diagnosis. It many times confuses. So, but there are people who like to see FLAIR images as well. I take FLAIR images only when I want a specific answer. Like sometimes on T2 weighted images, you see hyperintense signal, but you are not really sure that if this is without, for example, in cases of infantile INAD. So in that you get cerebellar atrophy, but along with that, there is a hyperintense signal of the cerebellar cortex. So on T2 weighted images, sometimes it really becomes difficult because of the hyperintense signal of your CSF, etc. But when you do FLAIR sequence in that images, the hyperintense signal of that abnormal cortex just stands out. So unless and until there is a reason to do a FLAIR, I don't do FLAIR in pediatric patient less than 2 years of age. I prefer doing routine T1, T2 in coronal. T1 is usually 3D in our center. T2 I take in both planes, axial as well as coronal. And then there is a routine standard diffusion and SWI images.
A related question is that suppose you are suspecting a dysplasia and you have done the MRI quite early, like say below the age of 15 months, and it is like negative because of what you already explained. Yeah. So what is the ideal age then when we should repeat it?
Well, that's a... even if I say wait till myelination, but if the baby is seizing like anything, it becomes difficult call for the clinicians to wait for till that age, because many a times when you have a structural cause, the epilepsy is resistant to drugs, and so it's a standard protocol for me to write that repeat the MRI after myelination. But if the seizures are really refractory seizures, I don't think they wait for that repeat MRI. They generally or do other sequel, they will do PET study or whatever they're from their semiology.
Pre-surgical will
So
start.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, and then retrospectively, you might have to see the MR again and try to figure out whether, okay, if this is hypometabolic on PET, then whether I'm seeing any abnormality retrospectively in that particular section. So things may, you may pick up something.
Another question is restricted diffusion in only the splenium of corpus callosum consistent with the HI in term babies?
Not really. So it is a just transient finding. Even in HI baby, if only the splenial restriction is there, then I disregard it unless and until there are other signs of hypoxia that I am seeing in that baby. So the splenial hyperintensity we see in not many cases. We see it in epilepsy, sometimes with some drug or so I really do not think it has got a pathological correlation with anything. It's just a cytotoxic edema of that splenium because of some unknown reasons. Splenium responds to that way to some insult, and it's a transient abnormality. So you really don't have to bother, or I don't think you can actually pinpoint the pathology only based on that finding.
Okay. And although this talk was for normal MRI, but is there any difference between hypoglycemic injury apart from the area involved that parieto-occipital is much more involved in hypoglycemic brain injury versus the HIE? Because many a times we find that there is a history of documented hypoglycemia and the lesions are extending right up to the frontal, and the report comes as HIE, query hypoglycemia. So,
yeah, because there is overlap of imaging patterns that you can see. The way, like hypoxia has got a, depending on the age of the baby, obviously, you have a basal ganglia pattern.
About
you
newborn, yeah.
Yeah, so basically term or preterm, that also matters.
Yeah.
So if we consider term baby, so you have either a basal ganglia pattern or watershed territory, etc. Sometimes it could be just pure white matter injury. So this pure white matter injury can be effect of both hypoxia as well as hypoglycemia, because severe hypoglycemia can also give rise to that kind of injury. So it becomes difficult imaging wise to differentiate between the two. Otherwise, predominant involvement of parieto-occipital lobes, as you said, or sometimes the thalamic involvement is also a common feature of hypoglycemia. So that's why there is a confusion on imaging. So I won't blame radiologist if he is not able to differentiate between, because some overlapping imaging features do exist.
And till what age do we get these peritrigonal hyperintensities? Like till what age are they normal?
They are normal as long as they are they have that typical distribution. They are normal even till young adulthood.
Okay. And what are the pituitary signal changes like with age? Like you showed in newborn, that right signal is to be taken as normal. So when does it
by 2 months
and,
of age, by 2 months of age, it becomes normal to your normal gland. So it doesn't stay that bright for a longer time. So by 2 to 3 months, it becomes normal, and the posterior pituitary start becoming bright. And then you have those size criteria like 6 millimeters till 12 years of age, where you will have the upper margin of the pituitary gland, which is concave. At puberty, you will get it convex, and the size will go up to 10 or sometimes 11, also 11, 12, more in females. And then again, it will come back to adult size by 18 or 19 years of age, around 8 millimeters, or depending on sex and the gender.
Okay. Somebody is, Dr. Kapil has asked, do the changes because of myelination give rise to changes on the DWI and ADC also?
Yeah, sometimes when there is an active myelination going on, so it looks like cytotoxic edema. It does happen. I have seen a couple of cases we are actually wondering whether it is a cytotoxic edema or it's a myelinating brain. But you can get, not always, but in certain tracts, sometimes you get those in optic tracts or optic radiations. When they are myelinating, you get this, because of the compact fibers, you get that restriction of diffusion on the ADC maps.
Okay, I think it covered all the questions, and I think it was an excellent talk. Everybody has really written so many congratulatory messages, and they want that it should be there on the website to access later. So I think there are no more questions. Some of the questions were like related, so I've already taken them. And just one last question. So in the newborn baby, if we are doing MRI for seizures, not for HIE, what should be the sequences to be advised?
They are the same sequences. You do
Same.
not actually differ, because there is no point in doing flare in those babies, because why edema is just way too much. In what I have observed is in newborn babies or babies less than 6 months, your T2 weighted images are quite interesting or important, because there you get maximum. If I show you, 1 second. So if you see the differentiation between the white matter and the cortex, it is best seen on T2 weighted images. T1 weighted images also have that contrast differentiation, but it is more appreciable on T2 weighted images. So you have to look T2 very carefully for your subtle cortical abnormalities or white matter signal changes. I do not have that case, but otherwise I would have, you have to compare both sides. You have to compare the white matter signal from the right cerebral hemisphere to the left cerebral hemisphere. You have to go section by section from frontal lobes to the occipital lobe, see the cortex, see the subcortical white matter. Many times there is hypermyelination that you see. So on T1 weighted images, that area looks bright, and on T2 weighted images, the similar area will look dark. So whenever you see that asymmetrical signal in a newborn, you have to suspect that probably there is some underlying cortical malformation that is happening in this area.
Okay, I think we come to the end of this session. Thank you so much, Yogeshwari. It was excellent. Even lots of senior pediatric neurologists have appreciated your talk in the
Thank
chat
you so
box.
much.
Yeah, and I will like to invite you, all of you, for the next talk, which is on cranial nerves imaging by Yogeshwari only. So I think I need not send any reminders for the next talk. Everybody will already put it in their calendar. So thank you so much, Yogeshwari. Thank you, Dr. Paudel, for joining from Nepal. And I thank all the participants on behalf of the AOC and Web Academy for participating in this excellent academic session. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night.
Yeah, good night. Bye.
Right.
Bye.